no doubt. Let me just run through 2014 year to date, what we have. We have lost 29 people this year. 1 to retirement, 12 to other employment, 4 to the police department here in Pueblo, 1 to the police department in Denver, Fremont, 1 resignation, 1 went to culinary arts school, 1 for personal reason, 1 went to Korea, 2 went to Everest, and 1 came back because he didn't like it and he wanted to come back. We had 6 resignations, ongoing foot issues, finished school, medical, wants to stay retired, father's illness, moving to Kansas. So I'd be more than happy to share any of these facts with anybody who's interested. It does cost money to train people. If there is a morale issue, as you want to tie this into, it is because every year that I've been sheriff, we've not gotten raises for our people.
Okay, Kirk, you'll answer this one first. When undocumented residents are arrested on suspicion of a crime, do you believe that every effort should be made to determine their legal status to be in the United States, or should the focus be on the crime for which they were arrested?
I'm going to have to ask you to read that one more time. I got most of it.
Sure. When undocumented residents are arrested on suspicion of a crime, do you believe that every effort should be made to determine their legal status to be in the United States, or should the emphasis be on the crime for which they were arrested?
Well, every effort to find out where their country of origin is that correct?
Yes.
That's not the law. When we passed secure communities a few years back, one of the reasons was that some of the agencies were trying to determine that. Some of the agencies weren't. It wasn't fundamentally fair. The secure communities legislation came through. Currently, the practice is if anybody, not necessarily an undocumented worker or is brought to the jail on a crime within this community, they are fingerprinted like everyone else. Those fingerprints go to CBI through Secure Communities computerized system. They are linked with the FBI. Those fingerprints then come back to say, yes, that is an undocumented worker or an illegal alien, or it is not. So the question you asked is, I guess, an opinion, but it's not the law. The law is you can ask them, but secure communities are supposed to take care of that. So currently they're fingerprinted, and then if they're undocumented, that information is sent back to you. And I'm going to have to ask the question.
Sure. Vic, the question is, when an undocumented resident is arrested for a crime, should every effort be made to determine their citizenship, whether they're here legally or not, or should you focus on the crime for which they were arrested?
Okay. We need to focus on the crime for which they was arrested. Whether they're here illegally or not, that is a federal job for the ICE. I understand that the ICE has been doing detainers on the detainees, arrestees, and everything, and that's been kind of a controversial issue and the results of a lot of lawsuits. So, like the sheriff was saying, with the secure communities, the fingerprint immediately goes to them, and they decide if they want to be there. If ICE wants to come arrest them and would take him to a federal holding facility, great. If they don't, then legally, at the risk of getting the county sued, we're not going to be able to hold them on one of their detainers. It's frustrating. We need our elected officials to step up to the plate and do something to make our borders secure and take some of this burden off of the local law enforcement and the local taxpayers.
Kirk?
I actually agree with Mr. Boley on most of it. I would just add that once ICE says they want to put a hold on them, there's 2 cases, one out of Philadelphia and the other one came out of Oregon, that said sheriffs in this state cannot hold them based on the old way that ICE used to put holds on. And that's what the district court has said. As sheriffs, all the sheriffs all got together and we developed a policy of which mine was the template, along with John Cook up in Weld County, and we put together a policy for sheriffs so that we wouldn't get our constituents sued for holding ICE holds without a signed affidavit by someone other. And so I would just expand on that and say it's just gotten a little more complicated, but the sheriffs took care of it this year.
Okay, Vic, you'll answer this question. As an elected official, the sheriff runs the department, but the county commissioners still exert a lot of control in terms of budget. Is the current funding for the department adequate, and if not, how will you get more money for the department?
The sheriff's office has recently accrued a bigger job with our new judicial building. The sheriff, with all due respect to him, dealt with one team of commissioners, and then that got passed to another team of commissioners, and that's got to be frustrating for him. What was negotiated or what was proposed, I'm not privy to or anything, but the chieftain has reported that the elected county officials are concerned because once we get their budget, we ought to be able to use our budget how we see fit instead of the county commissioners have to approve every little thing that goes along. I don't think that's right.
Okay. Kirk?
Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Sure. The sheriff is, as an elected official, runs the department, but the county commissioners exert a lot of control in terms of budget and funding. Is the current level of funding adequate?
No.
And if, okay, next question. And if not, and that's your reply, how will you get more money for the department?
Well, I can tell you that I have tried each and every year to get, number one, my folks up to market. We are losing the turnover rate that we discussed earlier. We are losing good officers to other agencies because we can't pay a market wage. My captains, for example, they make about as much as someone at the police department who is a sergeant. So understanding that, it's easy just to say, give me more money, but you have to find it. Now, I'm an independent thinker, and so I understand that there's only so much money from the tax base in Pueblo County to fund the sheriff's office, and we're the big dog at the trough. So when new commissioners come in, the first ones they want to cut is the biggest one because it has the biggest impact. I think eventually in this community, we are going to need what every other community that has a large jail population and I'm the 8th largest sheriff's office in the state. We're going to have to go after a public safety tax for the county. And that's the only way that we're going to get our people up to market value so that we can retain them. So that if this community decides that we want to build another jail, the funding will be there and it won't be relying on the county commissioners to do another bond or another judicial building type issue. I think we truly, as a community, need to look at that. My proposal is that we put together a blue ribbon panel to sit down and look at that, the feasibility of it, the cost of it, to include what we would spend that on. I believe it needs to have a sunset provision. It needs to go away so we don't pay it into perpetuity. And so that's just some of the ideas that I have.
Good? You're good? Okay. Kirk, you'll answer this question first. The Sheriff's Department has been pretty much free of public controversy in recent years. And we all know it's a department that through the past 4 or so decades has had a fair amount of controversy. If reelected, what will you do to keep the department out of controversy?
The last part again.
If reelected, how would you keep the department out of controversy?
Well, I think you have to have good policies in place. I think we continue the way we have been, making sure that we are up to contemporary policing standards. I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of people don't like accreditation. I didn't necessarily like it either. However, it does set the bar and the standards for which you can attain a certain level of competence. I think you have to continue to reward what you want repeated in your troops. We have some of the most programs for our troops in the form of training. When I came on, I took all the training money that was the previous sheriffs and I put it in the line, and I started sending people to training. I have all but 3 of my command staff officers who have been to some sort of executive police command school. I think that decreases your liability, it increases your effectiveness, and you have strong policies through accreditation that help keep you out of trouble. And the last part is that my wife of 30 years keeps me out of a whole lot of trouble.
Vic?
I'm going to have you repeat.
Sure. The department has been pretty much free of controversies in recent years. If elected, how would you continue to keep the department away from controversy?
To keep the controversy out, you want to run a clean and reputable department, obviously. And that's what I would do. We would set high standards for hiring and fair standards for promotions. And there's some that would, and myself included, that doesn't think that's happening now. Job assignments, and even some training requests. But if you get good, solid policies and procedures and do solid background checks, that's going to go a long way to keep you Also, the certifications. CALIA, we had that before. When the sheriff came into the department, he told us that he thought it was a paper gorilla and we didn't need it. But now we're going back after it again. So the certifications can help add to the liability protection to the community, to the sheriff's office. So I think those types of things are important to look into.
I agree. I just have one correction. It was a paper tiger. A paper tiger is a vernacular for it needs to be lived by the line. And if it's not lived by the line level and they don't try to utilize these standards and work to the standards, and it's just an administrative piece where the sheriff and his staff get the appropriate paperwork in for the accreditation, that's a paper tiger. So they did have accreditation way prior to me coming on board. They didn't have it when I got elected and took office. So I was not going to go back after a paper tiger. I am, however, like we did ACA, the line level needs to drive it. They need to want it. They need to live it. They need to train. I need to make sure that they have the training for it. And then you don't have a paper tiger. Then you have a real accreditation.
Okay, Vic, our final question, you'll answer that one first. Does it make sense in your mind to combine any of the departments of the Sheriff's Department with the Pueblo Police Department?
Duplication of services could and is costing the taxpayers money. We've tried combining the comm center before. The problem being is the difference in wages between the city and the county. We have people working side by side and making different and doing the exact same job, making completely different wages. So how are we going to address that? The only way that makes sense to the working guy is you bring the people that aren't making as much money up with the other ones. But there are some services that make sense to me to combine. Let's have a Metro SWAT team. Let's have a maybe a Metro CSI or our ID section, have them be together. Those types of things, I think if we worked with the city and other organizations, that would benefit our whole community, and we could have double the manpower and share the cost.